I sold my biotech company for $90 million this morning. To celebrate, I took my only son and his wife to the most expensive restaurant in New York City. I was about to sign over $5 million to him and set up a trust fund for my granddaughter. But when they went to the dance floor, a large hand gripped my shoulder. The restaurant security guard leaned down and whispered, "Mo, do not drink that juice. I saw your son pour a vial into it while you were looking away." I froze. I looked at the glass. I looked at the guard. Then I stood up, left my limitless black credit card on the table, and walked out the back door. By the time my son realized I was gone, I had already declared war. Before I tell you how I destroyed them, tell me where you are watching from in the comments. The air inside the Obsidian was cold, despite the warmth of the lighting and the hum of quiet, expensive conversation. I sat there, adjusting the cuffs of my shirt, feeling the weight of the pen in my inside pocket. It was a heavy gold-plated fountain pen that my late wife Catherine had given me 20 years ago. I had used it to sign the sale of Biocore this morning. $90 million. A lifetime of work stress and sleepless nights had culminated in a signature. Now I wanted to use that same pen to secure my son's future. Across the table, Brandon tapped his fingers against the white tablecloth. Tap, tap, tap. He was 40 years old, dressed in a suit that cost more than my first car, yet he looked like a nervous teenager waiting for the principal. He checked his Rolex for the third time in 5 minutes. His wife, Vanessa, sat beside him. She was smiling that practiced, tight smile she used for gala events. Her eyes, however, weren't on me. They were locked onto the leather briefcase I had placed by my feet. She knew the bank documents were in there, Dad Brandon said, breaking the silence. His voice was a little too loud, a little too eager. "You have to try this juice. I had them make it special for you. It is a blend of pomegranate and beet. Great for the heart. You know what Dr. Aris said about your blood pressure?" He pushed the crystal glass toward me. The liquid was dark, thick, and deep red. I looked at him. Really looked at him. He was sweating. Tiny beads of perspiration had formed on his upper lip, even though the restaurant was climate-controlled. "Thank you, son," I said. I reached for the glass. Vanessa leaned forward. "Drink it while it is fresh, Max. You need your strength. We have so much to celebrate tonight." Celebrate. Yes, that was the plan. But the atmosphere felt wrong. It felt like a boardroom moments before a hostile takeover, not a family dinner. I lifted the glass. The smell was earthy, masking anything else that might be in there. Brandon's eyes widened slightly. He stopped tapping his fingers. He was holding his breath. Suddenly the music swelled. A slow, romantic jazz number. Vanessa grabbed Brandon's hand. "Oh, honey, this is our song. Dance with me. Just for a minute." Brandon hesitated. He looked at the glass in my hand, then at his wife. "Go on," I said, lowering the glass. "I will be right here." He stood up, reluctant, and let Vanessa pull him toward the dance floor. He kept looking back over his shoulder at me. I watched them go. I sighed, feeling the fatigue of the day wash over me. I was 68 years old. I was rich. And I was tired. I lifted the glass to my lips again, ready to take a sip just to appease him. "Excuse me, sir." The voice was low, gravelly. I stopped. A large shadow fell over the table. I turned to see the security guard who had been standing near the kitchen entrance all night. His name tag read Joe. He was a man in his 50s, built like a tank with the sharp, alert eyes of a man who had seen combat. "Yes?" I asked. Joe didn't look at me. He looked at the dance floor, tracking Brandon and Vanessa. Then he leaned down, his voice a mere rumble in my ear. "Do not drink that, sir." I frowned. "Why not?" Because Joe said, his voice flat and terrifyingly calm. "I saw your son pour the contents of a small glass vial into it while you turned to greet the waiter. He hid the vial in his sleeve. My hand didn't shake. I didn't gasp. I just went cold. Ice cold. It was a sensation I hadn't felt since my days in the Marines decades ago. The feeling of an ambush. "Are you sure?" I asked, my voice steady. Joe slipped a hand into his pocket and pulled out his personal phone. He held it under the table, shielding the screen. I saw him. I took a burst of photos. Look. The image was grainy, taken from a distance and zoomed in, but it was undeniable. Brandon's hand was hovering over my glass. A small, clear vial was in his palm, tipping liquid into my pomegranate juice. The world stopped. The clinking of silverware, the jazz music, the laughter of other diners. It all faded into a dull roar. My son, my own blood, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the man I had bailed out of debt 3 times. I looked at the glass. It wasn't juice anymore. It was a weapon. "Thank you, Joe," I said. My voice sounded distant to my own ears. Joe nodded. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and respect. "What do you want me to do, sir? Do you want me to call the police?" "No," I said. "Not yet. If I make a scene now, they will deny it. They will say it was sweetener or medicine. I need to know what it is. I need to be sure." I looked at the potted plant next to our table. It was a large decorative fern. With a quick, smooth motion, I poured the entire contents of the glass into the soil. Then I set the empty glass back on the coaster. I reached into my wallet and pulled out my Centurion card. The black titanium felt cold in my fingers. I placed it in the center of the table, right where they couldn't miss it. Joe watched me. "You are leaving." I picked up my briefcase. The leather handle creaked in my grip. "Joe," I said, "if they ask, tell them I went to the restroom." I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but I forced them to move. I didn't walk toward the front door where the host stand was. I followed Joe's subtle nod toward the kitchen service exit. I walked past the steaming pots, the shouting chefs, the clatter of pans. I pushed through the heavy metal back door and stepped out into the cool New York night alleyway. The air smelled of garbage and exhaust, but to me it smelled like survival. I walked briskly to the corner and hailed a taxi. As I climbed into the back seat, I took one last look at the restaurant. Inside, my son was dancing with his wife, waiting for me to drink poison. "Take me to the Upper East Side," I told the driver, "and drive fast." I sat in the back of the yellow taxi, my hands clenching the leather briefcase so hard my knuckles turned white. I stared out the window as the city lights blurred into streaks of neon. I felt a strange sensation in my mouth, a tingling, a numbness at the tip of my tongue. I had barely touched the glass to my lips before Joe stopped me. Had I ingested a drop, just a microscopic amount, my heart began to race. Not from fear, but from a physical reaction. My chest felt tight. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The screen lit up. It was Brandon. I stared at the name. My thumb hovered over the decline button, but then I realized something. If I didn't answer, he would get suspicious too quickly. I needed time. I needed to know his mindset. I answered. "Hello, Dad." Brandon's voice came through the speaker. It was tight, high-pitched. "Where did you go? We came back to the table and you were gone." "I am in the restroom," I lied. My voice was raspy. It wasn't an act. My throat felt constricted. "Oh," Brandon said. There was a pause that lasted a second too long. Then he asked the question that sealed his fate. The question that confirmed everything Joe had said. He didn't ask, "Are you okay?" He didn't ask, "When are you coming back?" He asked, "Did you drink the juice?" The question hung in the air between us, transmitted across cell towers, heavy with malice. He sounded desperate. He sounded like a man who needed me to say yes. "I finished it," I said. "It was delicious." I heard him exhale. A long, shuddering breath. "Good." That is good, Dad. It is really good for you. Hurry back, we have to order dinner. I hung up and let the phone drop to the seat beside me. He wanted me to drink it. He was relieved I had drunk it. A memory flashed in my mind. 6 months ago. My wife Catherine had just passed away. I was devastated. My health took a turn. I had heart palpitations, fatigue. Brandon had moved into the guest house to help me. Dad. You need to take these vitamins, he had said, handing me a daily pill organizer. Dr. Aris said they would help with the stress. I had taken them. Every day. And every day I felt weaker. I felt foggier. My hands shook. I thought it was grief. I thought it was age. But now, as the taxi swerved through traffic, the truth hit me with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't grief. It wasn't age. He has been poisoning me for months. The realization made me gasp. I clutched my chest. The tightness was getting worse. Was it the drop from tonight, or was it the cumulative effect of months of toxins finally catching up to me now that the adrenaline was spiking my heart rate? Driver, I gasped. Change of destination. The driver looked in the rearview mirror, his eyes wide. You okay, buddy? You look pale. Take me to 74th and Park. Dr. Aris's private clinic. Not the hospital. Do you understand? Yeah, I got it. I couldn't go to the ER. If I went to the ER, it would be a public record. Brandon was my next of kin. They would call him. He would come rushing to my bedside, playing the concerned son, finishing the job if the doctors saved me. Number 1. I needed privacy. I needed Dr. Aris. My phone buzzed again. A text from Vanessa. Max, where are you? The waiter says your card is on the table. Is everything okay? They were getting restless. The timeline was collapsing. They expected me to slump over in the booth, clutching my chest. A tragic heart attack during a celebration. A sad ending for the CEO. I didn't reply. I focused on breathing. In, out, in, out. My tongue felt like it was 2 sizes too big. My vision was swimming at the edges. We pulled up to the brownstone that housed Dr. Aris's private practice. I threw a wad of cash at the driver, not bothering to count it, and stumbled out onto the sidewalk. I rang the night bell. Again. The intercom crackled. Max, is that you? Open the door, Aris, I wheezed. It is an emergency. 10 minutes later, I was sitting on an exam table, my shirt open, electrodes strapped to my chest. Dr. Aris, a small man with white hair and sharp spectacles, was reading the EKG machine while a nurse drew my blood. Your heart rate is erratic, Max, Aris said, his voice grim. You are in atrial fibrillation. What happened? I didn't tell him about the juice yet. I just said, run a tox screen. Now. Check for cardiac glycosides. Check for digoxin. Aris froze. He looked at me over his glasses. Max, you are not on heart medication. Digoxin is for heart failure. If you take that without needing it, it mimics a heart attack I finished for him. It stops the heart. Just run the test, Aris. Do it in your internal lab. Do not send it out. He nodded, sensing the gravity of the situation. He handed the vial of blood to the nurse, who rushed out of the room. While we waited, Aris gave me something to stabilize my heart rhythm. I lay back, staring at the ceiling tiles. I thought about Sophie, my granddaughter, Brandon's daughter. She was 7 years old, innocent, sweet. If I died tonight, she would be left in the care of a murderer and his accomplice. I couldn't die. Not yet. 20 minutes later, Aris came back. He was holding a piece of paper. His face was pale. Max, he said quietly, the levels are high, dangerously high. You have enough digoxin in your system to kill a horse. If you had finished whatever you were drinking tonight, I would be dead by dessert, I said. Eris sat down heavily on a stool. Who, he asked. I didn't answer. I reached for my phone. My hand was steady now. The medication Eris gave me was working, or perhaps it was the cold, hard resolve that had replaced my fear. I dialed a number. It wasn't the police. It was Leonard Katz, my personal attorney. It was 9:30 p.m., but Leonard answered on the first ring. Max. Is everything all right, Leonard? I said. I need you to meet me at Dr. Eris's clinic immediately. Bring the trust documents. Bring the sale contracts for Biocore. And Leonard, yes, Max. Bring the forensic accountants you used for the merger. I want a full deep dive audit into Brandon's finances. I want to know every cent he has spent in the last 5 years. I want to know who he owes money to. I want to know everything. There was a silence on the line. Leonard had been my friend for 30 years. He knew how much I loved my son. He knew I had blinded myself to Brandon's faults. Max, Leonard said softly. What has he done? He tried to kill me tonight, Leonard. I heard Leonard's sharp intake of breath. I am looking at a toxicology report that says I should be dead, I continued. He poisoned me. He wants the 90 million. I sat up on the exam table, buttoning my shirt. The numbness in my tongue was fading, replaced by a bitter taste. The taste of betrayal. Listen to me closely, Leonard. The Max Gallagher who signed those papers this morning is dead. The father who excused his son's gambling and laziness is dead. He died in that restaurant. I looked at Dr. Eris, then at my reflection in the dark window of the clinic. I looked old, but my eyes were burning. Come here now, I told Leonard. We are not just going to change the will. We are going to set a trap. If he wants my money so badly, I am going to let him think he has it. And then I am going to destroy him. I hung up the phone. Dr. Eris looked at me. Max, you need to go to a hospital. You need monitoring. I stood up. I felt a wave of dizziness, but I pushed it down. No hospitals, Eris. If I go to a hospital, he wins. He finds me. He plays the grieving son. Then where are you going? I walked over to the window and looked out at the street. A black sedan was pulling up. It was Leonard. I am going to check into a hotel, I said. I am going to hire the security guard who saved my life. And then I am going to watch my son panic. I turned to Eris. Keep this file safe. It is the first nail in his coffin. I walked out of the clinic and into the night. The city was loud, chaotic, and alive, just like me. My son had made a fatal error. He thought he was poisoning a helpless old man. He forgot that before I was a father, before I was a CEO, I was a man who built an empire from dirt. He forgot that I know how to kill a competitor. And tonight, my son is no longer family. He is the competition. 2 a.m, the witching hour. The time when the city of New York usually takes a breath, but tonight, the silence in my hotel suite felt heavy, like a physical weight pressing against my chest. I sat in a high-back leather chair facing the door, a glass of water in my hand. My heart was still fluttering, a lingering reminder of the digoxin coursing through my veins, but my mind was razor-sharp. The adrenaline of survival had burned away the fog. There was a soft knock at the door. 3 rapid taps. A pause. 2 more. It was Leonard. I unlocked the deadbolt and let him in. My attorney, a man I had known for 30 years, a man who usually wore tailored suits with the easy confidence of someone who knew where all the bodies were buried, looked like he had seen a ghost. His tie was undone. His silver hair was disheveled. He was clutching a thick manila envelope as if it were a shield. He didn't say hello. He just walked past me, threw the envelope onto the coffee table, and paced to the window. He looked down at the street, checking for a tail. They are not just in debt, Max Leonard said, his voice tight. They are dead men walking. I sat down and reached for the envelope. My hands were steady now. I pulled out the stack of papers. The forensic accountants Leonard had hired were worth every penny. They hadn't just looked at bank statements. They had dug into the digital underbelly of my son's life. I expected to see gambling debts. I expected to see bad investments. I expected to see a few $1,000,000 down the drain. Brandon had always been mediocre with money, trying to emulate my success without putting in the work. But what I saw on the first page made my blood run cold. Brandon Gallagher, the CEO of Gallant Capital, a firm I had helped him seed with $2 million 5 years ago, was not running a hedge fund. He was running a Ponzi scheme, and it had collapsed 3 weeks ago. I flipped the page. The list of creditors wasn't made up of banks or angry investors. It was a single name highlighted in red by the accountants: Volkov Holdings. I looked up at Leonard. Volkov as in the Brighton Beach Syndicate. Leonard turned from the window, his face pale. The very same. Brandon borrowed $15 million from them 6 months ago. He told them he had an insider trading tip, a sure thing. He gambled it on cryptocurrency futures and lost it all in 48 hours. $15 million. I stared at the number. It was an astronomical amount of stupidity, even for Brandon. The interest alone is burying him, Leonard continued. But that is not the worst part. Look at the date on the next document. I turned the page. It was a transcript of a text message exchange intercepted from Brandon's encrypted messaging app. Leonard's guys were terrifyingly efficient. The message was from a blocked number. It read Monday, noon. Payment in full or we take the girl. The girl. Sophie, my granddaughter. My hand crushed the paper. A sound escaped my throat, a low growl that didn't sound human. They weren't just threatening Brandon. They were threatening a 7-year-old child. The deadline is this coming Monday, Leonard said. 2 days from now. That is why they did it tonight, Max. That is why they poisoned you. They didn't just want the inheritance eventually. They needed the $90 million liquid and in their accounts by Monday morning to pay off the Russians and save their own skins. It made sense. The desperation. The sweat on Brandon's upper lip at dinner. The urgency of the special juice. They were cornered rats. But rats will chew through anything to escape even their own flesh and blood. I kept reading. The next document was a printout of an airline confirmation. Swiss International Airlines, Flight LX-15 from JFK to Zurich, departing Monday night at 9:30 p.m. One way. 2 tickets. I scanned the names. Brandon Gallagher, Vanessa Gallagher. I looked for the third name. I flipped the page. I checked the back. I looked at Leonard. Where is Sophie's ticket? I asked. My voice was calm, but it was the calm of the eye of a hurricane. Leonard didn't answer immediately. He walked over to the minibar, poured himself a scotch, and drank it in one swallow. He looked me in the eye, and I saw real pain in his gaze. There is no ticket for Sophie Max. The room spun. I gripped the armrests of the chair. What do you mean? Leonard pointed to the file. Vanessa put a deposit down on a boarding school in Switzerland. A boarding school that doesn't accept children under 12. Sophie is 7. They aren't taking her, Max. They are leaving her. I looked back at the threatening text. Payment in full or we take the girl. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. They weren't planning to pay the debt. The $90 million wasn't for the Russians. They were going to take my money, get on that plane to a non-extradition country with banking secrecy, and leave Sophie behind as collateral. They were going to allow my granddaughter to be taken by the Russian mob as payment for their failures. I felt a snapping sensation in my chest. It wasn't my heart failing. It was the last thread of attachment I had to my son breaking forever. He wasn't just a murderer. He was a monster. I stood up. The dizziness was gone. The weakness was gone. I felt a surge of energy, dark and powerful. "Vanessa," I whispered. "She is the one who booked the tickets. She is the architect," Leonard confirmed. "We found emails between her and a Swiss banker. She has been setting up shell accounts for weeks. She convinced Brandon that running was the only option. She convinced him that you were the only obstacle." I walked to the window and looked out at the New York skyline. Somewhere out there in a penthouse I paid for, my son and his wife were probably celebrating my death right now. They were probably toasting to their freedom, thinking the old man was cooling on a slab in the morgue and that the path to the 90 million was clear. They had no idea that the old man was standing in a hotel room 5 miles away, looking at the evidence of their damnation. "Leonard," said, turning back to him, "do we have access to the security cameras in their penthouse?" Leonard nodded. "You paid for the installation, Max. The contract is in your name. We have the admin codes." "Pull it up," I ordered. Leonard opened his laptop and typed furiously. A moment later, he turned the screen toward me. The feed was grainy black and white night vision, but the image was clear. It was the living room of Brandon's apartment. Brandon was pacing. He was holding a glass of whiskey, his movements jerky and erratic. He was shouting at someone on the phone. Vanessa was sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her iPad. She looked calm, cold. She was checking flight times. And there in the corner of the room, sitting on the floor with a stuffed bear, was Sophie. She was wearing her pajamas. She looked terrified. She was watching her father scream and her mother ignore her. My heart broke for her. She was alone in a room full of wolves. Suddenly, Brandon threw his phone against the wall. He turned to Vanessa. He shouted something. Leonard turned up the volume on the laptop. "Why hasn't the hospital called?" Brandon screamed. "He should be dead by now." "He drank it 3 hours ago." Vanessa didn't look up from her iPad. "Relax, Brandon. It takes time. Old hearts are stubborn. He probably collapsed in the taxi. He is likely a John Doe in some ER right now. But what if he isn't?" Brandon yelled. "What if he survived the Russians, Vanessa, Monday?" Vanessa stood up. She walked over to him and slapped him, hard. "Pull yourself together," she hissed. "If he isn't dead, we finish it. We have the power of attorney documents drafted. If he survived, he will be weak, confused. We tell the doctors he has dementia. We get him committed. We take control." She looked over at Sophie. "And get that kid to bed. She is crying again. I can't think with that noise." I watched Brandon grab Sophie by the arm, roughly pulling her up. Sophie wailed. I slammed the laptop shut. I couldn't watch anymore. Leonard looked at me. His face was grim. "What do we do?" "Max, call the police." "No," I said. "If we call the police now, Brandon and Vanessa will lawyer up. They will claim the text messages were spoofed. They will claim the poison was an accident. They will use my money to fight me in court for years, and Sophie will be stuck in the foster system while we battle." I walked to the door and grabbed my coat. "We need to secure Sophie," I said. "And we need to make sure Brandon and Vanessa never get on that plane." "How?" Leonard asked. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small empty vial I had retrieved from the potted plant at the restaurant before I left. I had gone back for it while Joe created a distraction. It still had a residue of digoxin inside. "They want to play games with poison," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "They want to declare me incompetent. Fine. I will give them exactly what they want." I turned to Leonard. "Call the private ambulance service you use for your high-profile clients, the ones who don't ask questions. Tell them to meet us at the Safe House in Westchester." "The Safe House?" Leonard asked. "The old farmhouse. You haven't been there in 10 years. "Exactly," I said. "It is isolated, it has no cell service, and it has a basement." I checked my watch. It was 2:30 a.m. Call Brandon, I told Leonard. Tell him you found me. Tell him I am confused wandering the streets and that I asked to be taken to the farmhouse because I think Catherine is still alive and waiting for me there. Tell him I look like I am dying. Leonard hesitated. You want to lure them there? I want to separate them from Sophie, I said. They won't bring her to a deathbed scene. They will leave her with the nanny. Once they are at the farmhouse, you send your security team to extract Sophie and take her to your place. And what happens at the farmhouse? Leonard asked. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. I am going to put on the performance of a lifetime Leonard. I am going to let them think they have won. I am going to let them think I am weak, senile, and fading away. I am going to let them confess everything to my face while the cameras roll. And then I said, opening the door to the hallway, I am going to introduce them to the consequences of their actions. Let's go, Leonard. We have a trap to set. The Regency Hotel was directly across the street from the building where my son lived. I had chosen this location with surgical precision. From the window of my darkened suite on the 14th floor, I could look across the avenue and see the lights of the penthouse I had purchased for Brandon and Vanessa 3 years ago as a wedding gift. It was a glass box in the sky, a monument to my generosity and their vanity. Leonard sat on the edge of the hotel bed, his laptop glowing blue in the dim room. He was typing in the administrative codes for the smart home security system installed in the penthouse. I remembered writing the check for that system, $50,000 for military-grade encryption motion sensors and high-definition audio and video recording in every room. Brandon had insisted on it. He said he was worried about kidnappers. Now I realized he was probably more worried about loan sharks. I stood by the window watching the real-time silhouette of my son pacing back and forth in his living room. Then Leonard cleared his throat. We are in Max. I turned away from the window and sat next to Leonard. The screen was split into 4 quadrants, showing the living room, the kitchen, the master bedroom, and the hallway. The image was crystal clear. The audio feed hissed for a moment before snapping into focus. The first thing I heard was the sound of glass shattering. On the screen, Brandon hurled a tumbler of scotch against the wall. It exploded above the fireplace, spraying amber liquid over the abstract painting Vanessa had bought in Paris. He isn't answering, Brandon screamed. His face was distorted red and sweaty. He looked like a cornered animal. I have called him 20 times. I have called the restaurant. I have called the cab company. He just vanished. Vanessa was sitting at the dining table, her posture rigid. She was typing furiously on her tablet. She didn't flinch when the glass broke. She was made of ice while my son was made of fire and panic. Stop breaking things, you idiot, she hissed without looking up. You are making a mess. We have to think. Think, Brandon roared. He grabbed his hair with both hands, pulling at the roots. There is nothing to think about, Vanessa. It is 3 a.m. If the old man isn't dead in a ditch somewhere, then he is alive. And if he is alive, and he realizes what was in that juice, we are finished. Do you understand finished? He walked over to the table and slammed his hands down on the mahogany surface. The Russians gave us until Monday, he whispered, his voice trembling with terror. If I do not have the wire transfer confirmation by noon on Monday, they are not going to sue us, Vanessa. They are going to skin us alive. They are going to poem us into pieces and mail us back to the States in boxes. I watched, feeling a cold detachment settle over me. My son wasn't grieving the potential death of his father. He was grieving the loss of his escape route. He was terrified of the physical pain awaiting him, but he felt no remorse for the pain he had inflicted on me. Vanessa finally looked up from her screen. Her eyes were dark and calculating. She looked at Brandon with pure contempt. He won't realize what was in the juice, she said calmly. He is 68 years old. He has a history of heart murmurs. If he survived the initial dose, he is probably confused. He is probably wandering around Midtown right now, dizzy and disoriented. The digoxin messes with the mind before it stops the heart. She stood up and walked over to a small safe built into the wall of the kitchen. I watched as she punched in the code. I memorized it. 1, 9, 8, 4. She pulled out a thick file folder and tossed it onto the table. "We need to control the narrative, Brandon," she said. "If he is dead, we play the grieving children. But if he is alive, if he shows up tomorrow, we need to make sure no one believes a word he says." Brandon stared at the folder. "What is that plan B?" Vanessa said. I leaned closer to the laptop screen. My heart hammered against my ribs. Plan B. They had a contingency for my survival. Vanessa opened the folder and spread out a series of documents. I saw letterheads that looked official. I saw medical logos. I spent the last month building a paper trail. She explained, her voice steady and terrifying. "I have been emailing Dr. Aris's office from a fake account asking about your memory lapses. I have been telling our friends at the club that you are getting aggressive, that you are forgetting names, that you are seeing things that aren't there." She picked up a document. "This is a draft of a medical evaluation. It says you are in the early stages of aggressive Alzheimer's. It says you are prone to paranoid delusions. It says you believe people are trying to poison you." I felt the blood drain from my face. It was brilliant. It was diabolical. If I went to the police now and told them my son tried to kill me, Vanessa would produce these documents. She would produce witnesses, her friends, people she had lied to, who would say, "Oh yes, poor Max. He has been losing his mind for months. He thinks everyone is out to get him." The police wouldn't arrest them. They would pity them. They would hand me back to my executioners. Brandon picked up the paper. His hands were shaking. "You faked this." "I forged Dr. Aris's signature," Vanessa said. "It is good enough to fool a patrol cop or an emergency room doctor." She looked Brandon dead in the eye. "Here is what we are going to do. We are going to call the police in 1 hour. We are going to report him missing. We are going to tell he wandered away from dinner. We are going to say he was confused, agitation, talking nonsense. We are going to tell them he is a danger to himself." Brandon nodded slowly. "A danger to himself." "Exactly," Vanessa said. "When they find him, they won't listen to his accusations. They will see a ranting, paranoid old man. They will bring him back to us. We will have him committed to a private facility by tomorrow afternoon. I have already picked one out upstate. It is very secluded. They don't allow visitors." And then Brandon asked. And then Vanessa said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "We get power of attorney. We liquidate the assets. We pay the Russians. And Max Gallagher spends the rest of his short life sedated in a room with padded walls until nature takes its course. Or until we help nature along." I sat back in the hotel chair, stunned. The cruelty was breathtaking. They didn't just want to kill me. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to steal my mind, my reputation, and my freedom before they stole my life. On the screen, a small movement caught my eye. In the corner of the living room feed, a small door opened. Sophie walked out. My granddaughter was wearing pink pajamas and holding a ragged stuffed rabbit by the ear. She looked tiny in the vast modern living room. She rubbed her eyes. "Daddy," she whimpered. "Why are you screaming?" Brandon spun around. The look on his face wasn't fatherly love. It was pure, unadulterated rage. He looked like he wanted to kick something, and she was the closest thing. "Go back to bed, Sophie," he yelled. Sophie flinched. "Mommy?" she asked, looking at Vanessa. Vanessa didn't even look at her. She was busy organizing the fake medical records. "Get her out of here, Brandon," Vanessa said coldly. "I cannot focus with her whining. She is supposed to be asleep." Brandon marched over to the little girl. He grabbed her by the upper arm, his grip visibly too tight. Sophie let out a sharp cry of pain. "I said get out," Brandon screamed, shaking her. He dragged her back toward her bedroom. I saw her little legs stumbling, trying to keep up. He shoved her into the room and slammed the door. I heard the lock click. I stared at the screen. The image of my granddaughter being thrown like a sack of garbage by her own father burned into my retinas. Leonard closed the laptop lid, cutting off the feed. He looked at me. His face was grim. "They are going to file a missing person report," Max Leonard said. "The police will be looking for you. If they find you and those forged documents are convincing." "They won't find me," I said. I stood up. My weakness was gone. The poison in my blood had been replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I walked to the closet and grabbed my coat. "We have to move, Leonard. We cannot stay here. If they track my phone or if anyone saw me leave the clinic, they will come here." "Where are we going?" Leonard asked. I thought about the safe house, the old farmhouse in Westchester. It was isolated. It was off the grid. It was the only place I could control the environment. But I wasn't just going to hide. I was going to invite them in. "They want a confused, sick old man," I said, buttoning my coat. "They want a man who thinks his dead wife is still alive." "Fine. I will give them exactly what they want." I turned to Leonard. "Call the private ambulance service, the one we use for transporting sensitive assets. Tell them to meet us at the corner of 5th and 42nd in 20 minutes. And Leonard." "Yes, Max, call Brandon." Leonard hesitated. "What do I tell him?" "Tell him you found me," I said. "Tell him I called you from a payphone delirious. Tell him I don't know what year it is. Tell him I am demanding to be taken to the old farmhouse because I think Catherine is waiting for me there to cook Sunday dinner." I checked my watch. Tell him to come alone. Tell him to bring the paperwork. Tell him I am ready to sign anything just to see my wife again. Leonard looked at me, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You are baiting the trap. They are desperate, Leonard. They are terrified of the Russians. They are terrified of losing the money. If you offer them an easy win, a senile father ready to sign over his empire in a quiet, dark house where no one can hear a scream, they won't ask questions. They will come running." And Sophie Leonard asked. "That is why we need Joe," I said. "While I keep them busy at the farmhouse, Joe is going to go to the penthouse. He is going to get my granddaughter out of that hellhole." I opened the hotel room door. "Let's go. It is time to put on the performance of a lifetime." I sat on the edge of the hotel bed, my eyes glued to the laptop screen, watching a black and white nightmare unfold in real time. Leonard had isolated the audio feed from Sophie's bedroom, and the sound was tearing my heart out by the roots. My granddaughter was huddled in the corner of her room, pressed into the gap between her bed and the wall, clutching a stuffed rabbit I had bought her for her 5th birthday. She wasn't just crying. She was trying to be silent. She had learned at 7 years old that making noise in that house was dangerous. Her small shoulders shook with the force of her suppressed sobs, a terrifying testament to the environment of fear my son had created right under my nose. I watched as she lifted her head, looking toward the locked door. "Mommy," she whispered, her voice barely a ghost of a sound over the speakers. "Daddy, please. I am scared." There was no answer. Just the muffled sounds of her parents in the living room arguing about flight schedules and wire transfers. They were discussing the logistics of erasing my existence while their daughter sat a few feet away, traumatized and alone. I looked at Leonard. He had turned away from the screen, unable to watch. He was a father, too. He knew what we were seeing. We were seeing the end of innocence. Seeing Sophie like that, discarded like a piece of luggage they didn't want to pay the oversized fee for, triggered a memory so sharp it physically hurt. It pulled me back 3 years to a rainy Tuesday afternoon in my office at BioCore. It was the day I had made the biggest mistake of my life, disguised as an act of love. We had received a buyout offer. $60 million. It was a good number, a retirement number. I was 65 then, and I was ready to slow down. I had called Brandon into my office to share the good news. I expected him to be thrilled. I expected him to see it as the finish line we had been running toward. But when I told him, he didn't smile. He looked terrified. He asked me what he would do next. I told him he could finally start his own venture, that he could take his share and build something for himself. I told him I wanted to spend more time with him fishing, traveling, being a grandfather. I told him I wanted to be a dad, not just a boss. And then I changed my mind. I saw the fear in his eyes and I misinterpreted it. I thought he was afraid of losing the structure, the purpose. So I declined the offer. I tore up the letter of intent right in front of him. I told him, "No, son. We keep building. I will stay. I will mentor you for 5 more years until you are ready to take the chair. I am doing this for you." I thought I was giving him a gift. I thought I was giving him a legacy. Now staring at the grainy footage of his daughter crying in the dark, I finally understood the look on his face that day 3 years ago. It wasn't fear of the unknown. It was hatred. Pure, unadulterated hatred. He didn't want my mentorship. He didn't want to learn how to lead. He didn't want to spend time with me. He wanted the money. He wanted the exit. When I tore up that contract, I wasn't saving him. In his eyes, I was locking him in a cage. I was the warden who had just extended his sentence by 5 years. Every dinner, every board meeting, every piece of advice I had given him since then, he had received it as an insult. He saw my love as control. He saw my guidance as tyranny. My sacrifice had curdled into his resentment, and that resentment had fermented into the poison he poured into my glass tonight. I looked back at the screen. Brandon had walked into the living room view. He was holding a glass of scotch, his movements loose and agitated. He walked past Sophie's door without even glancing at it. "He is checking the flight to Zurich again," Leonard murmured, reading the text on the screen over Brandon's shoulder via the high-definition camera zoom. "He isn't going to Zurich," I said, my voice low and steady. "He is going to prison. But first, he is going to know exactly what it feels like to be helpless." I stood up and walked to the window. The city lights below seemed cold and indifferent. I needed something more than lawyers and forensic accountants. I needed force. I needed someone who wasn't bound by the ethics of the Bar Association. I needed a wall of muscle between my granddaughter and the monsters in the other room. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a crumpled business card. It was the card the restaurant manager had given me years ago, the direct line for VIP security requests. I dialed the number. It rang 4 times. The Obsidian security desk. I didn't ask for the manager. I didn't ask for a reservation. "Put Joe on the phone," I said. "Who is this?" "This is Max Gallagher, the man who left the Black Centurion card on table 4. Put Joe on the phone. Now." There was a fumble, a muffled conversation, and then a deep, gravelly voice came on the line. "Mr. Gallagher." "You got out." "Okay, Joe," I said. "I am alive because of you. But the night isn't over." "I am glad to hear that, sir. I was worried when I saw the glass was empty." Joe listened to me carefully. "I am looking at a situation that requires a specific set of skills. I know you were Marines. I saw the tattoo on your forearm when you stopped me. Force Recon, if I am not mistaken." There was a silence on the line. A heavy, pregnant silence. Then Joe spoke, his tone shifting from service staff to soldier. "3rd Battalion, sir. What do you need?" "I need you to leave your post," I said. "I need you to walk out of that restaurant right now. I have a job for you. It is dangerous. It involves extracting a hostage from a high-security penthouse. And it involves protecting her with your life until I get there." "A hostage, sir?" "My 7-year-old granddaughter." I said, my voice cracking for the first time. "Her father is the man who tried to poison me. He is in that apartment. He is unstable. And he is planning to abandon her to people who will hurt her." I heard the sound of keys jingling on the other end. I heard a door opening. "Where are you, sir? I am at the Regency. But I don't need you here. I need you to meet my associate at the service entrance of the penthouse building on Fifth Avenue." "I am on my way," Joe said. "Joe," I added, "my fee for this night. For your silence, for your loyalty, and for the risk you are taking. $50,000. Cash. Tonight." "I don't need the money to save a kid, Mr. Gallagher," Joe said, and I could hear the wind of the street in the receiver. "But I won't say no to it after the job is done. I will be there in 10 minutes. He hung up. I turned back to Leonard. He was looking at me with a mixture of awe and concern. "You just hired a mercenary, Max." "I hired a guardian," I corrected him. "I hired the only man in this city who has proven he values my life more than his paycheck." I looked at the screen one last time. Sophie had fallen asleep on the floor, curled into a tight ball. "Hold on, sweetheart," I whispered to the pixelated image. "Grandpa is coming, and I am bringing the cavalry." I buttoned my coat. The transformation was complete. The grieving widower was gone. The doting father was gone. In their place stood a man who was ready to burn his own legacy to the ground if it meant saving the one innocent thing that remained. "Call the ambulance, Leonard," I ordered. "Tell them to meet us downstairs. It is time to go to the farmhouse. It is time to let my son think he has won." Leonard closed the laptop. We walked out of the hotel room, leaving the lights on, leaving the warmth behind. We were heading into the cold, dark countryside where the final act of this tragedy would play out. I checked my phone. No messages from Brandon. He was sweating. He was waiting. He had no idea that while he was waiting for news of my death, I was arranging the funeral of his freedom. The black private ambulance cut through the darkness of the Westchester countryside, like a hearse in a hurry. I lay strapped to the gurney in the back, not because I needed to be, but because I was rehearsing. I closed my eyes, visualizing the tremor in my hands, the slur in my speech. I had to become the very thing my son hoped. I was a broken, dying old man. Leonard sat on the bench opposite me, his face illuminated by the red glow of the equipment lights. He held my phone in his hand, as if it were a detonator. We turned onto the gravel driveway of the farmhouse. The tires crunched loudly in the silence of the night. This house had been my sanctuary once. It was where I raised Brandon. It was where Catherine spent her final summer watching the fireflies from the porch. Now it was a stage. I was about to turn my most sacred memories into a weapon of war. The driver killed the engine. Silence flooded the cabin. "It is time," Max Leonard said softly. I sat up and unbuckled the straps. I took a deep breath, letting the cold air fill my lungs. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small vial of digoxin residue I had saved. I looked at it one last time, reminding myself of the burning sensation in my throat, the betrayal that tasted worse than any poison. "Give me the phone," I said. Leonard handed it over. I dialed Brandon. It rang once. "Dad." Brandon's voice exploded through the speaker. It was a scream of pure, unfiltered panic. "Dad, where are you?" "We have been calling hospitals. We have been calling the police. Where the hell are you?" I let a long, heavy silence hang between us. I closed my eyes and let my head loll back against the metal wall of the ambulance. When I spoke, I pitched my voice low, dragging the vowels, adding a wet, raspy quality to my breath. "Brandon," I whispered. "Is that you, son?" "Dad," Brandon shouted. "Yes, it is me. Where are you?" "Are you okay?" I don't know," I mumbled. "It is so dark here. The lights aren't working. I think I came home." "Home?" Brandon asked, his voice sharp. "You mean the penthouse? You are not here." "No," I said, letting a tremor enter my voice. "The real home. The farm. Catherine. Your mother. She said she would meet me here. She said dinner was ready. There was a pause on the line. I could practically hear the gears turning in his head. He was processing. The old man is delirious. The poison worked. He is hallucinating. The farmhouse, Brandon said, his voice dropping an octave. He was trying to sound calm, trying to sound soothing. You drove all the way to Westchester. Dad, you shouldn't be driving. You are sick. I did not drive, I lied. I took a car. I don't remember. I just needed to be here. I felt so heavy. Then I dropped the bait, the hook that would drag him out of his safety and into my jurisdiction. I felt so heavy, son, I continued, my voice drifting. But I feel better now. I finished the paperwork. I didn't want you to worry. Paperwork, Brandon asked. The word came out like a gunshot. What paperwork, Dad? The bank papers, I said. The ones you gave me for the transfer. I signed them. I put them on the table. I just want you to be safe. I heard a muffled sound on the other end, like a hand being clamped over the receiver. He was talking to Vanessa. I could imagine the scene. The frantic whispering. He signed them. He signed the transfer. The money is ours. We just have to go get the papers. Dad, Brandon came back on the line. His voice was trembling, but not with fear anymore. It was trembling with greed. It was the sound of the man who just won the lottery. Dad, listen to me. You did a good thing. You did a very good thing. But I need you to stay awake. Do you hear me? Do not go to sleep. I am so tired, Brandon, I said, letting my voice fade. The fire is out. It is cold. No, do not sleep, Brandon yelled. Stay right there. Do not move. Vanessa and I are coming. We are coming to get you. We will be there in an hour. Just keep the papers safe, okay? Keep them right next to you. Okay, I whispered. Hurry, son. Mom is waiting. I hung up the phone. The transformation was instantaneous. The tremor vanished from my hand. The slur disappeared from my voice. I sat up straight, my eyes adjusting to the dark interior of the ambulance. He took the bait, I told Leonard. He thinks I signed the asset transfer. He thinks $90 million is sitting on a kitchen table in Westchester waiting for him to pick it up. Leonard looked at me, a mixture of admiration and chill in his eyes. You sounded convincing. I wasn't acting, I said, stepping out of the ambulance onto the gravel. I am tired, Leonard. I am tired of his lies. I am tired of his entitlement. And the part about his mother waiting for me, that wasn't for him. That was for me. If I am going to destroy my own son tonight, I need to believe she would forgive me. We walked up the porch steps. The wood creaked under my boots. The house loomed above us, a dark, silent shell. It smelled of dust and old pine. I unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer. It was freezing. The heating had been off for years. I turned to the ambulance crew, two large men who looked more like linebackers than paramedics. Bring the equipment inside, I ordered. Set up the staging area in the living room. I want a single armchair in the center facing the door. I want the lighting low, barely a flicker. And I want the cameras hidden in the bookshelves, the fireplace, and the ceiling corners. High definition, night vision. I want every bead of sweat on his face recorded. The crew moved efficiently, hauling cases of gear into the house. Leonard began setting up a command station in the kitchen, connecting the hidden cameras to a cloud server. We weren't just recording a confrontation. We were creating a piece of evidence that would stand up in any court, federal or criminal. I walked into the living room and stood in the center of the dusty rug. I looked around at the ghosts of my past, the fireplace where we hung stockings, the corner where the Christmas tree used to stand. This room had been filled with love once. Tonight, it would be filled with judgment. I went to the old oak desk in the study and pulled out a stack of blank paper. I took my gold pen, the one Catherine gave me, and scribbled nonsense on the bottom of the top sheet. A shaky, illegible scrawl that looked like the signature of a dying man. I placed the stack of papers on the small side table next to the armchair, the bait. Then I sat down in the armchair. It was cold and stiff. I wrapped my coat tighter around myself. Leonard came in from the kitchen. "Cameras are live, Max. Audio is crisp. The ambulance crew is hidden in the barn. They will come running on my signal." "Good," I said. And Joe Leonard checked his phone. Joe just texted. He is in position at the penthouse. He is waiting for Brandon and Vanessa to leave. As soon as their elevator descends, he is going in for Sophie. I nodded. The pieces were moving. The clock was ticking. I checked my watch. 3:30 in the morning. They would be here by 4:30. They would be speeding. They would be reckless. They would be thinking about the Swiss Alps and private accounts. They wouldn't be thinking about the father they were leaving behind to die. I leaned my head back and closed my eyes, but I didn't sleep. I rehearsed the scene in my mind. I visualized Brandon bursting through that door. I visualized Vanessa's cold eyes scanning the room for the papers. I visualized the moment I would open my eyes and drop the act. I needed to be weak. I needed to be pathetic. I needed to give them the confidence to say the quiet parts out loud. I needed a confession. Not just for the police, but for me. I needed to hear him say it. I needed to hear him admit that my life meant nothing to him compared to his debt. Only then could I do what had to be done. The wind howled outside, rattling the window panes. It sounded like a warning. I waited in the dark, a predator disguised as prey, listening for the sound of my son's engine coming to finish the job. The high beams of a car swept across the living room wall like a prison searchlight cutting through the dusty darkness. I heard the crunch of gravel under tires braking too hard, the sound of a heavy engine dying, and then the slam of car doors. 2 of them. They were moving fast. They were moving with the frantic energy of people running out of time. I let my head loll to the side, my chin resting on my chest. I relaxed my facial muscles, letting my mouth hang slightly open. I focused on my breathing, making it shallow and raspy. I had to sell this. I had to be the broken, dying old man they needed me to be. The front door didn't open. It exploded inward. Brandon didn't even turn the handle gently. He kicked it, rushing into the foyer with Vanessa right on his heels. A blast of cold night air followed them in, swirling the dust motes in the dim light of the single lamp I had left on. "Dad," Brandon shouted. He didn't run to me. He didn't check my pulse. He didn't look at my face to see if my eyes were open. He ran straight to the desk. He ran to the table. He scanned the room with wild, desperate eyes. He was looking for the papers. He was looking for his salvation. Vanessa was calmer but colder. She walked into the room, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood floor. She was wearing a trench coat, belted tight, her hands gloved. She looked like a hitman's accountant. She scanned the room, her eyes landing on me with the clinical detachment of a butcher eyeing a side of beef. "He is over there, Brandon," she said, her voice flat. "On the chair." Brandon spun around. He saw me. He rushed over, but he didn't kneel. He loomed over me, blocking out the dim light. I peered through my eyelashes, seeing the sweat glistening on his forehead, the manic dilation of his pupils. He smelled of scotch and fear. "Dad," he barked. "Dad." "Wake up," he grabbed my shoulders and shook me. It wasn't a gentle shake. It was violent. My head snapped back and forth. I let out a low groan, a sound of confusion and pain. "Where are the papers?" Brandon demanded, shaking me again. "You said you signed them. You said they were on the table." I stammered, letting my voice trail off into a wheeze. I blinked rapidly, trying to look unfocused. "Brandon, is that you?" "Yes, it is me." Where are the transfer documents? We need to go. I don't know, I whispered. I put them somewhere. I am so cold, son. Why is it so cold? Brandon let go of me, shoving me back against the hard chair. He spun around, tearing his hands through his hair. He lost them, he screamed at Vanessa. The old fool lost them. He is delirious. Find them, Brandon, Vanessa snapped. They have to be here. Check the desk, check the floor, tear this place apart if you have to. I watched through half-closed eyes as my son and his wife ransacked the room. They pulled books off the shelves. They swept the knickknacks off the mantelpiece, shattering the porcelain figurines Catherine had collected for 30 years. They ripped the cushions off the sofa. They were destroying my home, my memories, in a frantic search for $90 million that wasn't there. Not once did either of them ask if I needed water. Not once did they suggest calling a doctor. I watched Brandon overturn a small side table. A framed photograph fell face down on the rug. It was a picture of the three of us, me, Catherine, and Brandon, fishing on the lake when he was 10 years old. I remembered that day. He had caught a small perch. He was so proud. I had hugged him and told him he was a natural. I remembered the way he looked up at me with adoration. Now that same boy was kicking the frame aside, shattering the glass, his face twisted into a mask of greed. He isn't looking for a father, I thought, feeling a cold stone settle in my gut. He is looking for an ATM receipt. They found nothing. Of course they found nothing. The papers I had scribbled on were hidden under the chair cushion I was sitting on, but they were garbage anyway. The real transfer, the trap, was in the fact that there was nothing to find. Brandon stopped in the middle of the room, panting. His chest heaved. He looked at Vanessa, panic rising in his throat like bile. They aren't here, Ness. He lied. He lied to us. Or he lost them. We are screwed. The Russians. Monday. Vanessa walked over to him. She grabbed his face in her hands, forcing him to look at her. Stop it, she hissed. We are not screwed. We prepared for this. Remember Plan B? She reached into her oversized designer bag and pulled out a blue legal folder. It was thick. He is still alive, she said, gesturing to me. He is conscious enough to hold a pen. That is all we need. She handed the folder to Brandon. Get him to sign the new ones she ordered. The power of attorney. The irrevocable trust transfer. The guardianship papers. Everything. If he signs these, we don't need the bank transfer. We take control of everything tomorrow morning. We liquidate the accounts ourselves. Brandon looked at the folder, then at me. A change came over him. The panic receded, replaced by a cruel resolve. He straightened his jacket. He walked toward me, the folder in one hand, a pen in the other. He didn't look like a son anymore. He looked like a loan shark coming to collect. He pulled a wooden chair over and sat directly in front of me, our knees almost touching. He leaned in close. I could smell the alcohol on his breath mixed with the mint of a breath strip he must have taken to mask it. Dad, he said. His voice was fake soft, a parody of concern. Dad, listen to me. You are very sick. You are confused. I want to go to the hospital, I mumbled, playing my part. My chest hurts. No, Brandon said quickly. No hospital. The doctors. They can't help you right now. You need to rest. But before you rest, you need to help me. You need to help Sophie. Sophie, I asked, letting my eyes widen. Is she okay? She is fine, Brandon lied, smoothly. But she will be better if you sign these. These papers, they are for her college fund. Remember. You wanted to set up a trust for her. He opened the folder and placed it on my lap. The document on top wasn't a college fund. It was a durable power of attorney granting Brandon Gallagher full, unrestricted control over all my assets, medical decisions, and legal rights. It was a document that would effectively turn me into a ghost in my own life. I looked at the paper. The words swam before my eyes, not because I couldn't read them, but because I was forcing my eyes to unfocus. I can't read it, I wheezed. I don't have my glasses. You don't need to read it, Dad. Brandon said, his patience thinning. It is just standard stuff. Just sign on the line right here. He pressed the pen into my hand. My fingers trembled. I let the pen slip, dropping it onto the floor. Oops, I whispered. I am so clumsy. Brandon let out a growl of frustration. He bent down and snatched the pen up. He jammed it back into my hand, wrapping his fingers around mine, squeezing hard enough to bruise. Hold the damn pen, he snapped. Vanessa walked up behind his chair. She loomed over us like a vulture. Hurry up, Brandon, she said. The ambulance meant to take him to the facility will be here in an hour. We need those signatures before they sedate him. Facilities. Sedation. They weren't taking me to a hospital. They were taking me to a hole to rot. I held the pen hovering over the signature line. I let my hand shake violently. I don't think I should sign this, I said, my voice gaining a hint of clarity, just enough to scare him. I want to talk to Leonard. Where is Leonard? Brandon stiffened. The mention of my lawyer was a threat. Leonard isn't here, Dad. Leonard doesn't care about you. Only we care about you. He isn't signing, Vanessa said, her voice rising. He is stalling. Look at him. He is stalling. Brandon looked at me. He saw the hesitation. He saw the time ticking away. The pressure of the Russian debt, the fear of prison, the years of resentment, it all boiled over. He didn't coax me this time. He didn't lie. He raised his hand and slapped me across the face. The sound cracked through the silent house like a pistol shot. It wasn't a heavy blow, but it was sharp. Stinging. It knocked my head to the side. My cheek burned. I froze. For a second, the act almost dropped. The Marine in me wanted to snap his wrist. But I held on. I slowly turned my head back to look at him. I touched my cheek with a trembling hand. I looked at him with wide, watery eyes. Brandon, I whispered. You hit me. Brandon didn't look ashamed. He looked energized. He looked powerful. He leaned in his face inches from mine, his eyes manic. Sign the goddamn papers, old man, he hissed. Sign them right now. I am done waiting. I am done asking. You are going to sign everything over to me, and then you are going to go to sleep. And maybe if you are lucky, you will wake up in a nice soft bed in a place where they change your diapers. Or maybe you won't wake up at all. I don't care anymore. Just sign. He jabbed the paper with his finger. Vanessa laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. Tell him, Brandon. Tell him what he is. You are useless, Brandon spat at me. You are just a wallet with a pulse. You held that money over my head for years. You controlled me. You judged me. Well, now I am the one in control. Sign it. I looked at him. I looked deep into his eyes. I was looking for a flicker of regret. I was looking for the boy who used to cry when he scraped his knee. I was looking for my son. But there was no one home. There was only greed. There was only a stranger wearing my son's face. The slap had done more than sting my cheek. It had cleared my conscience. It was the final permission slip I needed. I gripped the pen. My hand stopped shaking. Okay, son, I said softly. I will sign. Brandon let out a breath, a mixture of relief and triumph. Good, good. Do it. I lowered the pen to the paper, but I didn't sign my name. I didn't sign the shaky scrawl of a dying man. I pressed the tip of the pen into the paper hard enough to tear it. Then I looked up. I locked eyes with him. I dropped the jaw-slack, eye-rolling act. I sat up straight in the chair. My gaze sharpened, becoming the steel-hard stare that had made grown men cry in boardrooms for 40 years. The silence in the room changed. It shifted from the silence of a death watch to the silence of a predator realizing it has walked into a cage. Brandon frowned. He sensed the shift. He pulled back slightly. "Dad," I tossed the pen onto the table. It clattered loudly. "I don't think I will sign, Brandon," I said. My voice was clear, strong, commanding. And by the way, I added, leaning forward, the slap was a mistake. "You really shouldn't have done that." Brandon blinked. He looked at Vanessa. She looked confused. "What?" Brandon asked. "What did you say?" I stood up. I didn't struggle. I didn't use the armrests. I stood up smoothly, buttoning my jacket, brushing a speck of dust from my lapel. "I said no," I replied. "And I think it is time we had a talk about your investment strategy, son. Specifically, the part where you try to murder your principal investor." Brandon stumbled back his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. He looked at me as if I had risen from the grave. You aren't sick," he whispered. I smiled, and it was the coldest smile I had ever worn. "No," I said. "I am not. But you are about to be." I looked down at the document blurring beneath my hand. The words, "durable power of attorney," seemed to float on the page, mocking me. This was the moment. This was the final test. If I signed this with a steady hand, they would take the paper, leave me here to rot, and liquidate my life's work by noon on Monday. If I refused, they would kill me. But there was a third option. The option of the saboteur. I gripped the gold pen Catherine had given me. I felt the metal bite into my skin. I let my hand spasm. It wasn't hard to fake. My body was still humming with the residue of the poison they had fed me earlier, and the adrenaline of the last 3 hours was beginning to curdle into exhaustion. I pressed the nib to the paper. I didn't write Maxwell Gallagher. I didn't write the name that commanded respect on Wall Street. I dragged the pen across the signature line in a jagged, violent scrawl. The ink bled. The paper tore. It looked like the desperate scratching of a man whose brain had finally misfired. I let the pen drop from my fingers. It clattered onto the hardwood floor, rolling away under the desk. There I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I did it. I signed it. Now can I sleep?" Brandon snatched the folder from my lap. He held it up to the dim light of the lamp, his eyes scanning the page frantically. I watched his face. I watched hope curdle into fury. "What is this?" he screamed. He shoved the paper into my face. "This is a scribble. This isn't a signature. The bank won't accept this. The lawyers won't accept this." "It looks like a child did it." I blinked up at him, keeping my eyes wide and vacant. I tried, son. My hand, it won't listen to me. I am so tired." "You didn't try?" Brandon roared. He threw the folder across the room. Papers scattered like dead leaves. "You are doing this on purpose. You are trying to sabotage me even now." He grabbed me by the lapels of my coat and shook me. My head snapped back and forth. "Sign it again," he yelled. "Pick up the pen and sign it properly. He is gone, Brandon." The voice came from the shadows behind him. Vanessa stepped forward. She wasn't looking at the papers. She was looking at Match. Her gaze was clinical, detached, like a coroner examining a corpse that hadn't quite stopped breathing yet. "Look at his pupils," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They are dilated. His skin is clammy. The juice we gave him at the restaurant. The digoxin. It is finally peaking. His heart is failing. He can't sign anything. His brain isn't sending the signals to his hand anymore. Brandon let go of me. I slumped back into the chair, panting. So what do we do? Brandon asked, his voice rising in panic. If he doesn't sign, we don't get control. If we don't get control, the Russians kill me on Monday. We are out of time, Ness. Vanessa walked over to the backpack Damien had brought. The survival kit. The kit that contained ropes, flashlights, and items for a darker purpose. She reached into the front pocket and pulled out a small, orange-capped vial and a sealed syringe. Insulin, she said. I felt a cold spike of adrenaline in my gut. Insulin. It was the perfect murder weapon for the elderly. If injected into someone who wasn't diabetic, it would cause a massive drop in blood sugar, hypoglycemic shock, coma, and then death. To a medical examiner, it would look like a massive stroke or simply heart failure, especially in a man with my medical history. It cleared the system quickly. It was untraceable after a few hours. Brandon stared at the vial. You brought insulin. My mother is diabetic, Vanessa said, calmly tapping the vial. I swiped this from her fridge last week, just in case. In case of what? In case the old man proved to be difficult, she said. She handed the syringe to Brandon. He is dying anyway, Brandon. Look at him. He is suffering. The digoxin is a slow way to go. This is a mercy. The word tasted like ash in the air. Give him the whole vial, Vanessa instructed. It will be over in 10 minutes. It will look like a stroke. We call the ambulance in the morning. We mourn. We cry. And since we are the sole heirs in the current, well, we don't need the power of attorney. We just need him dead before the banks open on Monday. Brandon held the syringe. His hands were shaking violently. He looked from the needle to me. I watched him. I didn't move. I didn't beg. I needed him to commit. I needed him to cross the line from thief to executioner. I needed the cameras hidden in the bookshelves to capture the exact moment my son decided to murder me with his own hands. He uncapped the needle. He drew the clear liquid into the chamber. Do it, Brandon, Vanessa hissed. Do it for Sophie. Do it for us. Brandon turned to me. He stepped closer. He grabbed my arm, rolling up the sleeve of my coat and shirt. His grip was clammy. I looked at him. I summoned every ounce of strength I had left to keep my voice weak, to keep the mask in place for just one more minute. Why, I whispered. The word hung in the silence. Brandon froze. The needle was hovering an inch from my skin. Why, son? I asked again, letting a tear leak out of my eye. It wasn't fake. I was crying for the little boy I used to hold. I gave you everything. I gave you the company. I gave you the house. I bailed you out. I loved you. Why do you hate me so much? Why is money worth more than your father? Something inside Brandon snapped. The tension that had been building in him for years, the pressure of the debt, the jealousy, the entitlement, it all exploded. He didn't inject me. Not yet. He needed to say it. He needed to vomit up the poison in his soul. Because you never gave me anything. He screamed, his face inches from mine. Spittle flew onto my cheek. You think writing a check is giving? You think buying me a car is love? You never gave me respect, Dad. Never. He waved the needle in the air, his eyes wild. I was never Brandon Gallagher to you. I was just the disappointment. I was the project that didn't yield a high enough return on investment. Do you know what it is like to walk into a room and have everyone look past you to see the great Max Gallagher? Do you know what it is like to run a company where every employee knows Daddy is the real boss? He laughed, a high, broken sound. You held that money over my head like a leash. You made me dance for it. You made me beg for it. Every time I had an idea, you crushed it. Every time I tried to build something, you told me it was risky. You suffocated me. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a venomous hiss. You aren't a father. You are a jam-packed ATM that stopped dispensing cash. You are a vault that I lost the combination to, and I am tired of trying to guess the code. I am tired of waiting for you to die so I can finally start living. He looked at Vanessa, then back at me. I don't hate you because you didn't love me, Dad. I hate you because you love your money more than you ever trusted me. You kept the control. You kept the power. Well, look at you now. You are sitting in a freezing house pissing yourself while I hold the needle. Who has the power now? He grabbed my arm again, harder this time. You want to know why? Because I need to be free of you. I need to erase you. The 90 million isn't just money. It is the price of my freedom. And if I have to stop your heart to get it, then that is just business, just like you taught me. The confession hit the airwaves. I knew Leonard was in the kitchen watching the levels on the audio monitor. I knew the cloud server was securing the file. Because you are a jammed ATM. Because I need to erase you. It was all there. First-degree premeditated murder. Conspiracy. Motive. He had handed me the keys, to his cell. Brandon positioned the needle over the vein in my arm. Say hello to Mom for me, he whispered. The metal tip of the needle touched my skin. That was it. The line was crossed. There was no going back. He wasn't hesitating. He was pushing the plunger. I didn't wait for this prick. I moved. My hand, the one he thought was weak and trembling, shot up and clamped around his wrist. The grip was iron. It was the grip of a man who had laid bricks for 10 years before he ever wore a suit. Brandon gasped. He tried to pull back, but I held him fast. The needle hovered, quivering. I opened my eyes fully. I cleared the fog from my gaze. I looked at him with the cold, hard clarity of a judge passing sentence. You got one thing wrong, Brandon, I said. My voice wasn't slurred. It was deep, resonant, and terrifyingly calm. Brandon froze. His eyes went wide. Dad, I didn't teach you that business is about killing the competition, I said, tightening my grip until I felt the bones in his wrist grind together. I taught you that business is about never underestimating the man across the table. I twisted his arm. He shrieked. The syringe flew from his hand, spinning through the air and sticking into the upholstery of the armchair with a dull thud. Vanessa screamed. Brandon stumbled back, clutching his wrist, staring at me as if I had turned into a demon. I stood up. I brushed the dust from my coat. I didn't sway. I didn't stumble. I filled the room with my presence. You aren't sick, Vanessa whispered, backing away until she hit the wall. You were faking. I looked at her, then at my son, who was cowering near the fireplace. I faked the weakness, I said, but the disappointment. That is real. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I tapped the screen once. Leonard, I said into the silence of the room. Did you get all that? The kitchen door swung open. Leonard stepped out holding a tablet. His face was grim, but his eyes were satisfied. Every word, Max, audio and video, clear as day. Brandon looked from me to Leonard. He looked at the hidden cameras that were now blinking red in the corners of the room. He realized the trap hadn't just sprung, it had crushed him. This is a setup, Brandon stammered. You can't use this. This is entrapment. I laughed. It wasn't a happy sound. Entrapment, I asked. I didn't put the poison in the juice, Brandon. I didn't buy the insulin. I didn't forge the medical records. I didn't book the one-way tickets to Zurich. I took a step toward him. And I certainly didn't tell you to leave my granddaughter alone in a penthouse with strangers while you came here to murder her grandfather. Brandon's face crumbled. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by the terrified realization of the debt he still owed. The Russians, he whimpered. Dad, if I don't pay them. I know, I said. Leonard told me everything. $15 million. I walked over to the desk where the fake papers lay scattered. You said I was a jammed ATM, I said softly. You were wrong. I was the only thing standing between you and the wolves, and you just tried to kill the guard dog. I checked my watch. It is 4:00 a.m., Brandon. The bank's open in 5 hours. But you won't be there. Why? He whispered. Because I said, leaning in close so he could smell the coffee on my breath, the only thing you are going to inherit today is a prison cell. I signaled to Leonard. Open the barn doors. Let the ambulance crew in. And call the police. Tell them we have caught 2 intruders in the act of attempted murder. Brandon fell to his knees. He started to sob. Not for me. For himself. But the night wasn't over. He still had the knife in his pocket. And a rat, when cornered, will bite one last time. Brandon looked up at me, his eyes shifting from sorrow to a final manic desperation. He reached into his jacket. You think you won? He screamed, pulling out a switchblade. You think you can send me to jail? I would rather die, but I am taking you with me, he lunged. And that is when the front door exploded inward. The metal tip of the needle pressed against my skin, a cold kiss of betrayal. I could feel the tremor in Brandon's hand, the vibration of his intent, traveling down the syringe and into my own arm. He was breathing hard, short, shallow gasps of air that smelled of scotch and fear. He was committing to the act. He was pushing the plunger. I did not wait for the liquid to enter my veins. I did not wait for the slide into the darkness he had prepared for me. The time for waiting was over. The time for acting had arrived. My hand, the one he believed was withered and weak, the hand he thought was trembling, with the last spasms of a dying heart, shot up. I clamped my fingers around his wrist. I didn't grab him like a father holding a son. I grabbed him like a vice. I grabbed him with the strength of a man who had laid brick foundations in freezing rain long before he ever sat in a leather boardroom chair. Brandon gasped. It was a wet, startled sound. He tried to pull back his instinct to recoil, but I held him fast. I squeezed. I felt the delicate bones of his wrist grind together under my grip. The needle halted. The clear liquid inside the chamber the insulin meant to stop my heart swirled harmlessly. I opened my eyes. I didn't open them halfway. I didn't flutter my eyelids. I snapped them open wide and clear. The fog of confusion I had so carefully cultivated evaporated in an instant. The dull, glazed look of the poisoned victim vanished, replaced by the razor-sharp glare of the CEO, who had chewed up competitors and spit them out for breakfast for 40 years. I looked at him. I looked directly into his dilated, terrified pupils. Brandon froze. His mouth hung open. He looked at my hand, gripping his wrist, then at my face, then back at my hand. The reality of the situation crashed into him like a freight train. The old man wasn't dying. The old man wasn't weak. The old man was crushing his arm. Dad, he whispered. The word came out as a question, a plea, a prayer, that this was just a final hysterical burst of adrenaline before death. I sat up. I didn't struggle to rise. I didn't use the armrests for support. I engaged my core and sat up straight, bringing my face inches from his. I brushed a speck of imaginary dust from the lapel of my jacket with my free hand, a gesture of casual dominance that I knew would terrify him more than a scream. You got one thing wrong, Brandon, I said. My voice was not the raspy wheeze of a geriatric. It was a low, resonant baritone that filled the silent room. It was the voice of authority. He tried to yank his arm away, again panic flaring in his eyes. Let go of me. I twisted his wrist. He shrieked a high-pitched sound of pain and shock. The syringe flew from his fingers, spinning through the air and landing on the dusty rug with a soft thud. The weapon was gone. The intent remained. Vanessa screamed from the shadows. It was a short, sharp sound of disbelief. She backed away until she hit the wall, her hands covering her mouth. She was staring at me as if I were a corpse that had just sat up in the coffin. You aren't sick," she whispered. "You were faking." I ignored her. I kept my eyes locked on my son. I stood up, forcing him to step back, forcing him to look up at me. I was taller than him. I had always been taller than him, but tonight I felt 10 feet tall. "You said I loved my money more than I loved you," I said. My voice calm, deadly calm. "You justified murder with my greed. You told yourself that I was the monster so you could sleep at night while you planned my execution." I took a step toward him. He stumbled back, hitting the edge of the fireplace. "You are wrong, Brandon. I don't love money more than you. I have spent my entire life trying to give it to you. I built this empire for you. I saved it for you. I protected it for you." I pointed a finger at his chest. "I don't love money more than you. I love integrity more than you." The words hung in the air, heavy and absolute. "I love honor more than you." I continued, my voice rising. "I love the truth more than I love the lie you have become. And tonight you forced me to choose between my son and my soul. And I chose my soul." Brandon stared at me. His face crumpled. The arrogance, the anger, the entitlement, it all dissolved into a puddle of sheer terror. He looked at the empty space on the table where the papers had been. He looked at the syringe on the floor. He looked at the hidden cameras blinking red in the corners of the room, realizing for the first time that the audience was not just his wife. This is a setup," he stammered. "You trapped me." "I didn't trap you," I said. "I just turned on the lights. You are the one who walked into the room with a needle in your hand." He looked around wildly. "The Russians," he muttered. "Monday. Noon." "I know," I said. "Leonard told me. $15 million. Brandon's head snapped up. "You know I know everything," I said. "I know about the Ponzi scheme. I know about the debts. I know about the one-way tickets to Zurich. I know you were going to leave Sophie behind as collateral." Brandon flinched, as if I had hit him. He looked at Vanessa. She was shaking her head, her eyes wide with fear. "You knew, and you still played this game?" Brandon asked, his voice trembling with a new kind of rage. "You could have written a check. You could have saved me. You have $90 million, and you let me walk into this. You let me try to kill you, just to prove a point." I looked at him with pity. Pity is a terrible thing to feel for your own child. It is colder than hate. "I didn't do this to prove a point, Brandon. I did this to get evidence. I did this because I knew that if I just said no, you would never stop. You would have killed me next week or next month. You would have pushed me down the stairs. You would have tampered with my brakes. You are an addict, son. You are addicted to the easy way out. And I am done being your fix." Brandon's face twisted. The fear was being replaced by the manic desperation of a drowning man who realizes the lifeboat has left without him. He realized there was no check coming. He realized there was no forgiveness. He realized the Russians were waiting for him on one side, and prison was waiting for him on the other. He began to laugh. It was a wet, broken sound. "Evidence," he choked out. "You think evidence matters. You think I care about jail. Dad, if I don't get that money by Monday, jail is a luxury resort compared to what happens to me." He reached into the waistband of his trousers. I saw the glint of metal before I registered what it was. A switchblade. A cheap serrated knife he must have bought on the street for protection against his creditors. The blade snapped open with a menacing click. Brandon lunged at me. He didn't slash. He grabbed the lapel of my coat with his free hand and shoved me backward against the desk. He pressed the tip of the knife against the soft skin under my chin. I felt the cold steel. I felt a trickle of blood as the point broke the skin. "Sign the papers." He screamed, spittle flying into my face. "Sign them now." "I don't care about the cameras. I don't care about the police. Sign the transfer, or I will cut your throat right here." I froze. I could feel his pulse hammering in the hand that held the knife. He was shaking so badly, the blade vibrated against my neck. "Brandon, don't do this," Vanessa shouted from the corner. "Put it down. This is murder." "Shut up," Brandon roared without looking at her. He pressed the knife harder. "Sign it." "Dad. Use the app, transfer the funds, do it now." I looked into his eyes. They were wild, bloodshot, and empty of anything human. He was gone. The son I knew was dead. I didn't struggle. I didn't try to disarm him. I just looked at him. "You can kill me, Brandon," I said softly. "You can cut my throat. But you can't get the money." What he hissed. "I moved my money this morning," I said. "At 9 a.m. before the restaurant. Before the poison. I moved $90 million into an irrevocable trust." Brandon's eyes widened. "No." "Yes," I said. "The trust is locked. It is sealed. The beneficiary is Sophie. Not you. And there is a clause, Brandon. A specific clause I added just in case something happened to me." I leaned forward, pressing my throat against his knife, daring him. "If I die under suspicious circumstances, I said the trust freezes for 50 years. No one gets a dime. Not Sophie. Not Charity. And certainly not you." Brandon's hand wavered. The knife slipped slightly, scratching my skin, but he didn't cut deep. The information hit him harder than a bullet. "If you kill me," I whispered, "you seal your own death warrant. The Russians will never get paid." He stared at me. His mouth worked, but no sound came out. He realized the trap was absolute. Alive, I was his enemy. Dead, I was his doom. He had no moves left. He let out a scream of pure animal frustration. He raised the knife not to cut me, but to stab, to strike out in blind fury. And that is when the front door exploded inward. The heavy oak frame splintered, showering the foyer with wood and dust. A shadow filled the doorway. Massive, imposing. It wasn't the police. It was Joe. And he looked like Judgment Day. The heavy oak door lay in splinters on the foyer floor, dust swirling in the cold air like a phantom mist. Joe stood in the frame, a silhouette of pure, kinetic violence, his chest heaving, his fists clenched like hammers. He looked ready to tear the house down beam by beam to get to me. But he didn't move. He froze. He froze because Brandon, in a spasm of terrified reflex, had yanked me back against his chest, the serrated blade of the switchblade pressing so hard against my carotid artery that a single sneeze would have ended my life. "Back off," Brandon screamed, his voice cracking into a high, hysterical shriek. "Back off, or I will open him up. I swear to God, I will do it." Joe hesitated. His eyes, dark and assessing, locked onto mine. He was calculating the distance. He was calculating the speed of the knife versus the speed of his lunge. He saw the blood trickling down my neck. He knew the odds. He stayed put, a coiled spring, waiting for a mistake. The room was silent save for the ragged, wet sound of my son's breathing in my ear. He was trembling so violently that his teeth were chattering. He was a trapped rat, and trapped rats bite. And that is when I started to laugh. It started as a low rumble in my chest, a vibration that traveled through my back and into Brandon's chest. Then it bubbled up, a dry, rasping chuckle that grew into a full-throated, genuine laugh. It was the laughter of a man who sees the punchline of a cosmic joke that no one else gets. Brandon stiffened. He pressed the knife harder. "Shut up," he hissed. "Why are you laughing? You are going to die." I laughed harder. I laughed until tears pricked my eyes. I laughed because the absurdity of it was perfect. I laughed because he was holding a knife to the throat of a corpse. Not a physical corpse, but a financial one. "You can't kill me, Brandon," I wheezed, catching my breath. "I can," he screamed. "I am doing it right now," I said, my voice dropping to a conversational tone as if we were discussing quarterly projections over coffee. "You can end my biological functions. You can stop my heart. But you cannot kill me because I am already gone. The Max Gallagher you are trying to rob. He left the building at 9 o'clock this morning." Brandon's grip loosened just a fraction. Confusion is a powerful sedative. "What are you talking about?" I took a breath. I ignored the sting of the steel on my skin. "Did you really think I sold the company and just let $90 million sit in a checking account?" I asked. "Did you think I was that careless, or did you think I was that stupid?" I felt him shift his weight. "I had a meeting this morning, Brandon. Before the restaurant. Before the poison. Before you tried to play God. I met with Leonard and a team of estate planners. At 9 o'clock a.m. sharp, Vanessa, who had been cowering in the corner, stepped forward. Her face was gray. "What did you do, Max?" she whispered. I didn't answer her. I spoke to my son. "I created an irrevocable trust, Brandon. Do you know what that means? You went to business school. You should know." Brandon didn't answer. "It means it is done," I said. "It means the assets are no longer mine. I transferred the full proceeds of the Biocore sale, $90 million, plus the deeds to the penthouse and this farm into the trust immediately upon closing. I don't own them anymore." "So I inherit the trust," Brandon yelled, trying to regain control of the narrative. "I am your next of kin. If you die, I become the trustee." "That is how it works," I shook my head slowly, careful of the blade. "That is the best part," I said. "You are not the trustee. You are not the beneficiary. You are not even a footnote." I felt his heart hammer against my back. "Who?" he choked out. "Who gets it, Sophie?" I said. The name hung in the air. "Sophie is the sole beneficiary," I continued. "But she doesn't get a dime until she turns 25. Until then, the trust is managed by a board of independent directors. Leonard is the chairman. They have strict instructions. They pay for her education. They pay for her health. They pay for her security." I paused, letting the next words form clearly in the cold air. "And they have explicit instructions to ensure that her parents never see a single cent. Not for rent. Not for food. Not for a plane ticket to Zurich." "You are lying," Brandon whispered. "You wouldn't cut me out. You need me." "I don't need you," I said. "I needed a son. I got a parasite." Brandon's hand began to shake again. The knife wavered. "It doesn't matter," he muttered, trying to convince himself. If you die without a will, or if we challenge the trust, we can fight it. We can get a settlement." "And that brings me to the clause," I said softly. "The poison pill." I leaned back, pressing my head against his shoulder, forcing him to listen. "I knew you, Brandon. I knew you better than you know yourself. I knew that if I cut you off, you might get desperate. I knew you might get violent. So I added a special stipulation. Clause 14b. We called it the dead man's switch." I felt him freeze. "If I die," I said, enunciating every syllable. "If I die under suspicious circumstances. If I die from an accident. If I die from a sudden heart attack. If I die from a slip and fall. If I die from a knife to the throat." I took a breath. "The trust freezes." "Freezes," Vanessa whispered. "Locks down," I confirmed. "For 50 years, the assets are liquidated and converted into government bonds. The interest is donated to the NYPD Widows and Orphans Fund. The principal sits in a vault until Sophie is 57 years old. I let that sink in. If you kill me right now, Brandon, you don't get the money. Sophie doesn't get the money. No one gets the money. You kill me and you kill the cash. You burn the only thing in the world you actually care about. Brandon stood there paralyzed. His brain was trying to find a loophole, a way out, a path to the $15 million he owed the Russians. But there was no path. I had bricked up every exit. I had burned every bridge. Monday is coming, son, I whispered. It is Saturday morning. You have 48 hours. The Russians don't care about probate court. They don't care about trusts. They want cash. And you have zero. Zero. The word echoed in the room. You killed your father for zero, I said brutally. You abandoned your daughter for zero. You sold your soul for absolutely nothing. The knife pulled away from my throat. Not because he decided to spare me, but because his arm lost the strength to hold it. The reality of his situation crashed down on him with the weight of a collapsing building. He wasn't looking at a hostage anymore. He was looking at his own execution. He stepped back. He looked at the knife in his hand. It wasn't a weapon of power. It was a useless toy. He looked at Vanessa. She was staring at him with eyes wide with horror. She wasn't horrified by what he had almost done. She was horrified because she realized the money was gone. She realized the ticket to Zurich was worthless. She realized she was married to a dead man. You really did it, Brandon whispered. His voice was hollow. You really hated me that much. I turned to face him. I saw the tears streaming down his face. They were tears of self-pity. Tears of a man who had gambled everything on a pair of twos and lost to a royal flush. I didn't do it because I hate you, I said quietly. I did it because I finally stopped lying to myself. I stopped pretending you were a victim. I treated you like a man. I held you accountable. Brandon looked at his hands. He looked at the cameras blinking in the corners. He looked at Joe, standing in the doorway, blocking the only exit. The Russians, he whimpered. They are going to kill me. I adjusted my collar. I wiped the blood from my neck with my handkerchief. Yes, I said. They probably are. Brandon let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a high, keen wail of despair. His legs gave out. He collapsed to the floor, the knife clattering from his hand. He curled into a ball, sobbing, rocking back and forth on the dusty rug. He was broken. He was finished. The threat was neutralized, not by a bullet, but by a signature. I looked at Joe. I nodded. The show is over, I said. Joe stepped into the room. He didn't rush. He walked with the heavy, inevitable stride of justice. He approached the weeping figure on the floor. But the night had one last violent act to play out. Because while Brandon was broken, he was still a cornered animal. And animals, when they realize they are going to die, sometimes decide to take everyone else with them. Brandon stopped crying. He looked up. His eyes were red wet and filled with a sudden psychotic clarity. He looked at the knife lying 3 feet away. If I am dead anyway, he screamed, lunging for the blade, then I might as well finish the job. He scrambled for the weapon, his fingers brushing the handle. He wasn't fast enough. Brandon lunged a desperate, feral motion, the knife slicing through the stale air of the farmhouse. He wasn't aiming. He was flailing, driven by the blind panic of a creature that knows the walls are closing in. But before the blade could come within a foot of my chest, the world exploded. The sound wasn't like a door opening. It was like a thunderclap trapped inside a box. The heavy oak frame of the farmhouse entrance didn't just swing in. It disintegrated. Splinters of wood and twisted metal hinges sprayed across the foyer as a mass of pure kinetic energy barreled into the room. It was Joe. He didn't run. He flowed. He moved with a speed that defied his size, a blur of dark clothing and focused violence. He covered the distance between the doorway and my son in a heartbeat. Brandon never stood a chance. He didn't even see it coming. Joe's left hand shot out, clamping onto Brandon's knife wrist with the force of a hydraulic press. I heard a sickening snap, the sound of dry wood breaking as Joe twisted. Brandon shrieked a high, thin sound of agony that was cut short as Joe's right shoulder slammed into his chest. The impact lifted my son off his feet. He flew backward airborne for a split second before crashing onto the dusty rug with a bone-jarring thud. The knife skittered across the floor, spinning uselessly away into the darkness. Joe didn't stop. He dropped a knee onto Brandon's back, driving the air from his lungs with a harsh wheeze. He grabbed Brandon's good arm and wrenched it behind him, pinning him to the floorboards with effortless, practiced efficiency. "Stay down." Joe growled, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floor. "Do not move. Do not breathe unless I tell you to." Brandon groaned, his face pressed into the dust, sobbing in pain and defeat. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs, watching the man I had hired save my life. I adjusted my jacket, smoothing out the wrinkles, reclaiming my dignity in the chaos. "Thank you, Joe," I said quietly. Joe looked up at me. His eyes were calm, assessing. "Are you hurt, Mr. Gallagher?" "I am fine," I said. "Just a scratch." I looked at Vanessa. She was huddled in the corner near the fireplace, her hands over her head, trembling violently. She wasn't screaming, she was hyperventilating, her eyes darting between her fallen husband and the imposing figure of the bodyguard. She looked small. She looked pathetic. Then the second wave hit. From the shattered doorway, blue and red lights washed over the walls, strobing through the dust. The wail of sirens, which had been a distant hum, suddenly cut, replaced by the heavy tread of boots on the porch. "Police, show me your hands!" Police uniformed officers poured into the room, guns drawn, their flashlights cutting through the gloom. They moved with precision, sweeping the corners, securing the scene. Leonard walked in behind them, looking calm but pale. He had timed it perfectly. Detective Miller, a stern-faced man I had met briefly at the precinct charity gala years ago, stepped forward. He lowered his weapon when he saw Joe signal that the threat was neutralized. "Mr. Gallagher," Miller asked, looking at me. "I am here, Detective," I said. Miller looked at Brandon, who was being hauled to his feet by two officers, his arm hanging at an odd angle, tears streaming down his face mixed with snot and dust. He looked at the syringe still stuck in the arm of the chair. He looked at the knife on the floor. "It seems we got here just in time," Miller said. "You did," I replied. I walked over to the side table where Leonard had placed the evidence bag. I picked it up. Inside was the vial of digoxin residue I had saved from the restaurant. "I want to report an attempted murder, Detective," I said, my voice steady and loud enough for everyone in the room to hear. "2 counts. One by poison earlier this evening, and one by lethal injection attempted just now." I pointed to the syringe in the chair. "That syringe contains a lethal dose of insulin," I said. "They intended to inject me with it to simulate a heart attack." Brandon began to shout as the officers cuffed him. "It wasn't me, I didn't want to do it. She made me." He thrashed at trying to turn toward Vanessa. "She planned it. She bought the tickets. She forged the documents. I just wanted the money. She told me to kill him." Vanessa stood up slowly. The shock was wearing off, replaced by the survival instinct of a cockroach. She smoothed her hair. She looked at the police, then at me, summoning tears that shimmered perfectly in the harsh lights of the police torches. "He is lying," she cried, her voice trembling with practiced vulnerability. "He is a drug addict. He has a gambling problem. I was terrified of him. He forced me to come here. He said he would kill me and his father if I didn't help him." She took a step toward Detective Miller, hands clasped in supplication. "Officer, please, you have to protect me. He is a monster." I tried to stop him. I tried to talk him out of it. "I am a victim here." I watched her performance. It was impressive. It was almost convincing. She was playing the battered wife, the coerced accomplice. She was trying to rewrite the narrative in real time. Detective Miller looked at her, then at Brandon, then at me. It was a classic he said, she said scenario. Without proof, it would be a mess in court. But I wasn't leaving anything to chance. Not tonight. I walked over to the bookshelf. I reached up and pulled a small black device from between two dusty encyclopedias. A hidden camera. The red recording light was still blinking. I turned to Vanessa. She froze. Her eyes locked onto the device in my hand. "You are a victim?" I asked, my voice cold. "Yes," she sobbed. "I am." I looked at Detective Miller. "Detective," I said, "before you book her, I think you should listen to something." I pulled out my phone. I opened the app connected to the camera system. I scrolled back 10 minutes. I pressed play. I turned the volume up to maximum. Vanessa's voice filled the room, crisp and clear, cutting through her current sobs like a razor. "Give him the whole vial, Brandon. It will be over in 10 minutes. It will look like a stroke. We call the ambulance in the morning." The recording continued. "Do it, Brandon. Do it for Sophie. Do it for us." I paused the recording. The silence in the room was absolute. Vanessa's face had gone the color of ash. Her mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The tears dried up instantly, revealing the hard, panicked stare underneath. That is out of context," she whispered. I scrolled back further. To the conversation I had recorded from the hotel room, the one from their penthouse. "If he isn't dead, we finish it. We tell the doctors he has dementia. We get him committed. And Max Gallagher spends the rest of his short life sedated." I looked at her. "You are not a victim, Vanessa," I said. "You are the architect. You suggested the insulin. You forged the medical records. You booked the one-way tickets to Zurich. And you were the one who suggested leaving my granddaughter behind as collateral for the Russian mob." I turned to the detective. "She is the brain, detective. My son is just the weapon. Arrest them both." Detective Miller nodded to his officers. "Cuff her." Vanessa screamed as the officers grabbed her arms. It wasn't a scream of fear anymore. It was a scream of pure rage. She lunged at me, her face twisted into a mask of hatred. "You old bastard," she shrieked. "You should have just died. You ruin everything. It was our money, it was ours." Joe stepped in front of me, a human shield blocking her view. He didn't touch her. He just stood there, an immovable object. "Get them out of here," I said, turning my back on them. I listened as they were dragged out the door. Brandon was weeping, begging for his father. Vanessa was cursing, screaming profanities that would make a sailor blush. I didn't look back. I walked over to the fireplace and leaned against the mantel. I felt a sudden crushing exhaustion settle over me. The adrenaline was fading, leaving behind a hollow ache in my chest. Leonard walked over and put a hand on my shoulder. "It is over, Max." "Is it?" I asked, looking at the empty room where my son had tried to kill me. "Sophie is safe," Leonard said. "Joe's team extracted her 20 minutes ago. She is at my house with my wife. She is sleeping. She is safe." I nodded. That was the only thing that mattered. I looked at the syringe still stuck in the chair. I looked at the shattered door. I looked at the ruins of my family. I had won. I had defeated the competition. I had protected the asset. But as I stood in the cold, dusty house where I had once held my newborn son and promised to protect him from the world, I realized that I had lost something too. I had lost the illusion that love was enough. I straightened up. I buttoned my coat. "Let's go, Leonard," I said. "I have a granddaughter to raise, and I have a company to buy back." We walked out into the night, leaving the farmhouse to the police and the ghosts. The war was over. Now the rebuilding had to begin. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and old paper, a dry, sterile scent that stood in sharp contrast to the damp, dusty rot of the farmhouse where my son tried to end my life 6 months ago. I sat in the witness stand, my hands resting calmly on the polished wood railing. I was wearing my best charcoal suit, the one I used to wear for board meetings when I had to fire someone, in a way that is exactly what I was doing today. I was firing my son from my life, permanently. The prosecutor, a sharp woman named Ms. Sterling, asked me to recount the events of that night. I did. I spoke clearly. I spoke without hesitation. I told the jury about the poison in the pomegranate juice. I told them about the fake medical records. I told them about the insulin syringe and the switchblade. I told them about the look in my son's eyes when he realized the money was gone. I told them everything, but I did not look at him. Not once. I knew he was there. I could hear his shallow breathing. I could feel his gaze burning into the side of my face, desperate for acknowledgement, desperate for me to look at him with anger, or hate, or even pity. He wanted a connection. He wanted to be seen. But I denied him that final luxury. To me, the chair at the defense table was empty. The man who sat there had died the moment he poured digoxin into my glass. When I finished my testimony, the silence in the room was heavy. The jury, 12 strangers who had seen the video evidence, who had heard the audio recordings, looked at Brandon not with anger, but with revulsion. They looked at him like he was something they had scraped off their shoe. The defense attorney tried to cross-examine me. He tried to paint me as a cold, controlling father who had driven his son to desperation. He asked if I had ever hugged him. He asked if I had ever told him I was proud of him. I leaned into the microphone. I looked the lawyer in the eye. I loved him enough to build him a future, I said. I loved him enough to give him a second chance and a third and a fourth. But love is not a suicide pact, and I refused to let him take me down with him. The lawyer sat down. He had nothing. The verdict came back in 3 hours. Guilty, on all counts. Attempted murder in the first degree. Conspiracy to commit murder. Wire fraud. Aggravated assault. When the judge asked Brandon if he had anything to say before sentencing, my son stood up. He looked small. The arrogance was gone. The expensive suit hung loosely on his frame. He had lost 20 pounds in county jail. He looked at me, tears streaming down his face. "Dad," he whispered, "I am sorry. I was scared. Please." I didn't blink. I didn't nod. I stared through him at the back wall of the courtroom. The judge cleared his throat. He was an older man, a father himself, and he looked at Brandon with zero sympathy. "Mr. Gallagher," the judge said, "you betrayed the most fundamental trust in human existence. You tried to kill the man who gave you life because you were too lazy to earn your own. You are a danger to society, and frankly, you are a danger to yourself." The gavel fell like a guillotine blade. 25 years in a maximum security state penitentiary. No possibility of parole for 20 years. Vanessa, who had turned on Brandon the moment the handcuffs clicked, received 15 years. She screamed when the sentence was read. She shrieked that she was a victim, that she was coerced. But the video of her instructing Brandon to use the insulin had sealed her fate. As the bailiffs dragged her away, she wasn't looking at me. She was looking at her reflection in the glass partition, horrified that she would age in a cage. The courtroom began to clear. Reporters rushed for the doors to file their stories. The gallery emptied. I stood up to leave. Leonard was at my side, his hand on my elbow, guiding me. But I stopped. I looked at the defense table. Brandon was still standing there, handcuffed, waiting for the transport officers. He was staring at the floor, his shoulders shaking. His lawyer was packing up his briefcase, looking eager to be done with a losing case. I walked over to the railing that separated the gallery from the well of the court. I motioned to the lawyer. "Mr. Henderson," I said. "A word." The lawyer looked up, surprised. "Yes, Mr. Gallagher." I leaned in close. I kept my voice low, a whisper meant only for him and the man standing next to him. I want you to give my son a message, I said, since I am not allowed to speak to him directly due to the restraining order. Brandon's head snapped up. He looked at me, hope flaring in his eyes. He thought this was it. He thought this was the moment of forgiveness. He thought Daddy was going to pull some strings, maybe arrange for a nicer prison, maybe put some money in his commissary account. I looked at the lawyer, but I spoke to my son. Tell him that I know about the debt to Volkov Holdings, I said. Tell him I know that $15 million doesn't just disappear because you go to prison. I saw the color drain from Brandon's face. His hope died instantly, replaced by a terror so pure it was almost palpable. Tell him, I continued, my voice as cold as the grave, that the Russian syndicate has a very long reach. Tell him that they have associates in upstate correctional. I didn't pay his debt, Mr. Henderson, and I didn't pay for his protection. I paused, letting the finality of it sink in. Tell him that he isn't going to a sanctuary. He is going to a hunting ground. And he is the prey. Brandon let out a strangled sound. He tried to lunge toward the railing, but the bailiffs grabbed him. Dad, no, you can't let them. They will kill me, Dad. I turned my back on him. I buttoned my jacket. I didn't hear a son crying for help. I heard the consequences of a lifetime of bad choices finally catching up. Let's go, Leonard, I said. I walked out of the courtroom doors and into the hallway. The air was cooler out here. Cleaner. Behind me, the heavy wooden doors swung shut, muffling the screams of a man who had realized that prison wasn't the end of his punishment. It was just the beginning. The obsidian looked exactly the same as it had 6 months ago. The same subdued lighting, the same polished silverware, the same jazz quartet playing softly in the corner. But everything else had changed. The last time I was here, I was a man waiting to be poisoned by his own son. Tonight, I was a man who had survived the antidote. I sat at table 4, the same table where I had left my black card, and walked out into the night. But this time the chair across from me wasn't occupied by a sweating, treacherous son. It was occupied by a 7-year-old girl with bright eyes and a new dress, who was currently trying to decide between the macaroni and cheese or the filet mignon. Sophie looked up at me. Grandpa, can I get the steak? But can they cut it into little squares? I smiled. You can have whatever you want, sweetheart. And yes, they will cut it for you. I looked to my right. Joe was sitting there. He looked uncomfortable in a suit. He kept checking the exits, his eyes scanning the room out of habit. He wasn't wearing a security uniform anymore. He was wearing an Italian suit I had bought for him. It fit him perfectly, masking the bulk of his muscle, but doing nothing to hide the dangerous alertness in his posture. Relax, Joe, I said. You are off the clock. You are a guest tonight. Joe adjusted his tie. Old habits die hard, Mr. Gallagher. Call me Max, I said. You saved my life. Mr. Gallagher is what my enemies call me before I bankrupt them. The waiter arrived with a bottle of sparkling cider for Sophie and a bottle of vintage Pinot Noir for us. He poured the wine. I watched the red liquid fill the glass. I remembered the thick, dark pomegranate juice. I remembered the feeling of betrayal. But tonight, the wine just looked like wine. I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a white envelope. I slid it across the table to Joe. What is this? Joe asked, eyeing it suspiciously. Open it, I said. Joe picked up the envelope. He opened the flap and pulled out a check. He looked at the number. He blinked. He looked at it again. Then he looked at me, his mouth slightly open. Max, he said, his voice low. This is too much. You already paid me. You gave me the $50,000. That was for the job, I said. This is for the future. I leaned forward. I remember that night in the car after we got Sophie out. You told me about your wife. You told me about the bakery she wanted to open before she got sick. You told me you were working 3 jobs to pay off her medical bills and save up for a storefront. Joe looked down at the check. $1 million. Buy the bakery. Joe, I said. Name it after her. Bake the bread. Quit the security job. Stop standing in the shadows watching other people live their lives. Go live yours. Joe's eyes were wet. He shook his head. I can't accept this. You have to, I said. Because if you don't, I will just donate it to a cat shelter, and I hate cats. Joe laughed. It was a genuine warm sound. Besides, I added, looking at Sophie, who was busy coloring on the kids' menu. You are not an employee anymore, Joe. You are family. You are the only person who stood between my granddaughter and a nightmare. That kind of loyalty doesn't have a price tag, but it does have a reward. Joe folded the check carefully and put it in his pocket. Thank you, Max. I don't know what to say. Say you will bring us fresh croissants on Sundays, I said. Deal, Joe smiled. The waiter returned with our drinks. He placed a glass of fresh orange juice in front of me. Freshly squeezed, sir, the waiter said. Just as you asked. I looked at the glass. Bright. Orange. Innocent. 6 months ago, I would have hesitated. I would have wondered who made it. I would have wondered if it was safe. But the fear was gone. The paranoia that Brandon and Vanessa had tried to weaponize against me had evaporated in the harsh light of truth. I picked up the glass. I looked at Sophie, who was showing Joe her drawing. I looked at Joe, who was already planning his bakery menu in his head. I looked around the restaurant at the people laughing and eating, oblivious to the drama that had played out here. I realized that I wasn't just rich. I was free. I was free of the son who hated me. I was free of the guilt of not being enough. I was free to be the grandfather Sophie needed. I raised the glass in a silent toast to the empty chair where Brandon used to sit. Goodbye, son, I thought. I hope you find redemption, but you won't find it here. I brought the glass to my lips. I took a long, deep swallow. Ideally sweet, perfectly cold, safe. I set the empty glass down on the table with a satisfying clink. I smiled at my new family. So I said, Who wants dessert? Ophi raised her hand. Me. Joe grinned. I could eat. Then let's order everything on the menu, I said. We have a lot of catching up to do. I sat back in my chair, listening to the music, watching the people I loved, and for the first time in a very long time, I didn't look over my shoulder. I just looked forward. I spent a lifetime building an empire, but it took one night to learn that my greatest investment wasn't in stocks, but in boundaries. I learned that shared blood is not a license for abuse. By protecting my son from the world, I created a monster who thought he was entitled to my life. Real family isn't defined by DNA. It is defined by loyalty, respect, and who stands by you when the knife is at your throat. Don't let guilt keep you in a toxic relationship. Sometimes walking away is the only way to survive. If you agree that respect must be earned, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories of justice. And tell me in the comments, did I do the right thing, or was I too harsh on my own son?